Good afternoon, everyone. We hope that you can all hear us. Let us know through the chat feature if you're experiencing any difficulties. On behalf of the New Jersey Center for Student Success and the Council of County Colleges, I'd like to welcome you all to a guided pathways approach to student completion, which will be presented by our colleagues and friends in North Carolina from Completion by Design. At the end of the webinar, we will open up for questions. You may ask questions by going to the Go To Control panel, clicking on the Questions tab, and typing in your questions. This webinar will be recorded and placed on our website. I would like to introduce you all to Susan Barbetta, who is the director of the Student Success Learning Institute and the Multiple Measures Research Study at Guilford Technical Community College. Susan has worked on Achieving the Dream, the Developmental Education Initiative, and the North Carolina State Developmental Math Redesign Team. Prior to joining Completion by Design, Susan taught developmental and curriculum math and computer science in multiple universities and community colleges across the country. She is joined by an impassioned educator and community college advocate, Margaret Annunziata, who works with administrators, faculty, staff, and students at Davidson County Community College to design, implement, assess, and report on policies, practices, and college efforts to remove barriers that prevent students from realizing their educational and career goals while creating an environment that fosters student success. Embracing a strengths-based approach for working with students, Ms. Annunziata leads college-wide efforts that promote students' retention, persistence, and attainment of students' educational goals. So Susan and Margaret, we have 15 of our community colleges, including 13 of our cohort colleges who have registered for the webinar, and now I'll turn it over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining Margaret and myself for this webinar. I just want to let you know that we'll present a quick overview of the Lost Momentum Framework, which we've been told many of you have already heard about. We'll tell you how we scaled our guided pathways in North Carolina. We have 58 community colleges in the state. 5 of them were part of the original Completion by Design efforts. And to date, we've been able to scale these guided pathways to 47 of the remaining 53 community colleges. We'll give you an overview of the changes that 2 of these colleges have made. We refer to them as our Student Success Learning Institute, or SSLI colleges. There's been a high level of engagement from all of our colleges, but the changes have been pretty dramatic between one college and another. Some have had very minimal changes, minimal costs. Others have really jumped in with both feet and made very extensive changes. We'll show you the 2 smaller ones, how a large fully engaged college, GTCC, has implemented its guided pathways. And then we'll end with Margaret talking about the leadership and the cultural changes at Davidson County Community College and all of everything they have in place for student success. One additional common thread at all of these SSLI colleges, the 47 colleges, is that they've each appointed a lead or a project lead at their college to really drive the train and spearhead the effort. Some of our colleges have given release time or stipends for folks to do that, but the majority of them have not. So it's just an additional responsibility that someone has taken on. But that appointing someone a lead really seems to help move our colleges forward. Okay, a little bit about the Lost Momentum Framework. These are the 4 main stages of interaction between students and the college. There's lost points, where students stumble or become sidetracked. And then we have the momentum points, which are the events that propel a student forward. Here you can see the 4 stages of the Lost Momentum Framework. And when we think about connection, this is the stage where a student wakes up one day, decides they want to go to college, all the way through when they actually register. So the process of applying to the college, filling out their financial aid paperwork, doing any sorts of orientations, and then begin to register. Some lost points associated with this stage are the student thinks about applying to college, but they never really do. They have poor placement tests preparation, and so they walk in there not realizing the importance of a placement test and score several levels below curriculum level courses. They often have insufficient career counseling or program advising. They really just don't know what they want to do, and often they miss financial aid opportunities, which can sidetrack them from actually registering for classes. On the momentum side of this, we find that students that can take a placement test in high school and potentially remediate while they're still in high school really helps them through registration. And colleges that offer both high school bridge programs and GED bridge programs seem to help or create a momentum point for students. When we look at the next phase or the next stage, we're talking about students from when they actually enroll in their classes until they get through that first gateway math or English course. And I don't know if it happens like this in New Jersey as it does in North Carolina, but we have some students that will have every single course they need to graduate except their gateway math course. And so a lost point for entry is students that either don't pass their gateway math or English course, and often they don't finish their DevEd either. Too many unstructured programs or too many choices for students is a lost point. And then those students that have applied to limited enrollment programs as nursing, for an example, but don't get in, so they really never get into their program of study. And typically in the past, we haven't done a very good job of advising potentially alternate programs and just let students begin to accumulate credits. A momentum point associated with the entry phase is helping a student make that connection with the college, so assigning them an advisor from day one, and we sort of refer to that as our go-to person. Another momentum point is when they actually finish their DevEd, finish their Gateway Math or English course, and then they're ready to move into a program of study and providing assistance so they make smart choices. During the progress stage, we refer to when the student is in their program of study until they actually complete their program requirements. And some lost points here is that students have in the past taken many courses that aren't in their program of study. So we haven't done a very good job of directing them. There's just been too many options. Options are to a certain degree, but just too many choices. We haven't monitored their progress. We often don't even know if students are on track or off track. And often our communication has only been when the student is on academic probation or financial aid probation, when that's often too late to really get them back on track. The momentum points associated with this stage, though, are when students complete 50% of their program requirements. If we have stackable credentials and a student can complete a certificate or a diploma and see the light at the end of the tunnel, and additionally have that credential if they need to stop out for a little bit of time or just stop completely. And another momentum point is emergency aid. There are some colleges that if a student has less than 12 credits necessary to graduate, there's often emergency financial aid available. The last stage is completion, and we're talking here when a student actually completes all of the requirements in their program of study and when they transition into the labor market with ready skills, or if they transfer to a four-year university. What we see here is, as a lost point, is that students often accumulate credits that aren't aligned with completion. We had one student at GTCC, the college that I'm at, that had 180 credits, and the only certificate they had was Office Systems Technology certificate. When we looked at their records, we realized that they'd taken one lab science course, just 4 credits, they would have earned 5 more associate's degrees. And that's, sort of a result of us not really monitoring. Another lost point is when their financial aid runs out very close to the end, they transfer without a credential and they lose credits. And as I've already mentioned, they complete everything except that Gateway Math course, and they drop out. A momentum points for this stage are program awards, recognition, work-based opportunities, and then removing barriers to graduation. For a while, the school I'm at had a $50 fee for graduation, which some students just cannot afford. Recently, Virginia just went to auto-awarding degrees for students, and so that's, and as I've said, some schools have emergency aid if a student has less than 12 credits for completion. Associated with this entire framework, we need leadership that's focused on successful student outcomes, local and state policies that support student progress, and you'll see in more detail in a little while what I mean about that, and technology to support the student engagement. Many of our colleges have gone to using some sort of advising software, and as a state, we don't recommend any one advising software, but rather highlight the importance of having advising software. So we think we have a pretty linear path for our students to follow, when in fact, it often looks like this. We have potential first-time students. They get confused by all the financial aid paperwork. For many of our students, they're first generation. There's no one at home to help them fill out any of that paperwork. They miss deadlines. Sometimes they'll delay getting into college, saying they're going to work part-time and then come back. We find that students are not prepared for the placement test, and they place several levels into developmental education. And so they might have 4 semesters worth of Dev Ed classes to take, although we have changed that recently. And just students choosing technical programs, taking the wrong math. They typically have self-advised, and they're taking courses that aren't in their program of study. Then they change their major potentially to another technical program or to a transfer program, and their advisor tells them, I'm so sorry, but most of these credits won't transfer, or it's the wrong English, it's the wrong math, and eventually our students lose their financial aid, or they typically don't meet satisfactory academic progress. So unfortunately, this is what the path has looked like up until now. But we found what students want to know, just pretty point blank, they want to know what are their career options and what classes do I need to take to pursue a specific career. How long is it going to take me to get all of those courses under my belt, and will all these courses transfer? And then, of course, how much is this going to cost and how much financial aid I can get? So it's really these 6 questions that students tell us they wish they had been told very early on. Okay. Here we see the Lost Momentum framework again, and a couple of things I want to mention about this. During the acceleration into programs of study, we found that a lot of our colleges have implemented summer boot camps or summer bridge programs. They're making orientation mandatory. A few of our colleges are requiring placement test preparation. I'll talk about multiple placement criteria in a little while. Our first-year experience courses, we refer to them in North Carolina as ACA. A few of our colleges are making those mandatory during the first semester. And then we've had concurrent enrollment in the highest level of developmental education courses aligned with a college-level course, and I'll show you some of the data on that. We've completely revamped our developmental reading, English, and math into 4-week modules so that if a student isn't successful in all of them, they've at least accumulated some credits and they don't have to completely start over. We know that that first semester and the first year is so important. Valencia College has told us that if a student can pass their first 5 courses, and that includes their Dev Ed courses, they have a 60% chance of graduating. So we really know the importance of that first semester. For each one course that they fail, their success rate is cut in half. So if a student only passes 4 of their first 5 classes, they're only 30% likely to graduate. And again, this includes their Dev Ed courses. We also know that if a student can accumulate 9 credits into their program of study during their first year, they're more likely to graduate. And so these 4 stages, connection, entry, progress, and completion, we're really attempting to mitigate all of the loss points and reinforce the momentum points. Okay, so our guided pathway is the old way and the new way. It used to be more of a cafeteria model. We didn't have advising, was really just registration. We didn't necessarily have any career focus or career onboarding. We didn't monitor the student's progress. And in our guided pathway system, we have a clear roadmap from start to finish. Our intake process now includes career assessment, and we know about our students, whether they're on track or off track, and try to provide as much feedback to the student as possible. So again, more than just when they're in academic trouble or financial aid trouble. Okay, so how did we scale all of this from the 5 institutions in North Carolina to the 47 that we have so far? This has encompassed 161,000 students. Unlike some states, participation is optional, there's no cost, and it's a 2-year cohort that each of these colleges go through. We provide an internet-based Moodle course, webinars, participatory activities, and videos. Our teams, college teams, create action plans throughout the year with the assistance of face-to-face meetings and regional technical support. So we hope to be guiding our college teams through the change management process. Like I said earlier, every college has been has a high level of interest and really engaged, but not necessarily every college has implemented, certainly differently from one another, and not all of the initiatives. Okay. We started off with just the introduction to guided pathways, and then you can see the 4 major initiatives that we discussed with all of our colleges and the format in which we've done this. Okay. A couple of things to mention is we've included poverty simulations for our colleges, just really being able to experience what someone living in poverty has to deal with on a daily basis. We've also incorporated career training for some of our counselors, so an actual career certification to do a more effective job of that during our onboarding process. Okay, so here's our first college with minimal change. High level of engagement from their college president, really high level engagement from their faculty and staff. This happens to be a small rural school in the state. What they did for their front door experience is they revamped their orientation, but they only offer 4 orientations per semester. It is mandatory, but it's only face-to-face, and there's only 4 of them each semester. It's led by student services personnel, so there is no participation from faculty. They've revisited how they deal with the high schools in their county, hired someone new to really go after the career and college promise students, and that's just really been on fire for them. This past year, they've doubled the number of their CCT students. And they've streamlined their financial aid process. They've asked students, why didn't you apply financial aid? Why have you not received it? What's been the problem? They took all of those responses and hopefully they've streamlined their process, and hopefully that's going to help them. They do have mandatory advising every single semester, and that is a faculty advising model. So the role of faculty has been redefined a little bit to include advising, and there's no course release time or stipends for that. That's just been an additional duty faculty is needed to take on. They are not using advising software, although they really want to. It's a matter of cost right now. So we're just beginning at the state level to explore some of the free advising software that's present in our student management system, and they potentially might use that. They felt that the very first thing for building stakeholder engagement was to hear from their students. And I just wanted, what they did was they did not have money to really hold student focus groups, provide any kind of food and beverages, or give out gift cards to get students to attend. And since this is a small school, single campus, what they did was just literally hang poster board all over campus with a pen dangling from it that said, tell us what we're doing well, tell us what we can do better. And they did hire someone part-time to just transcribe all of those poster boards, and they feel that they've gotten some really good information from their students. And so that's how they initially started their stakeholder engagement. It was with their students. Under their acceleration of programs and of studies, they decided not to make any kind of placement test, any kind of review mandatory. So a student just walks in there and takes a placement test, and they do not allow students to retest, which is really different than most of our colleges, but this is just a decision that they make. Multiple measures refers to multiple forms of assessment that would allow a student to place directly into curriculum level courses And the state of North Carolina just went with a unweighted high school GPA of 2.6 or better, a fourth level of math beyond Algebra 2, and it has to be within 5 years of graduation. The student is deemed college ready and does not need to take a placement test. We sort of have a floating and flexible date for implementation. This college began it in 2013, but they do not have any specific academic interventions in place for any of the students potentially on the low end, maybe the 2.6 to 3.0. Their developmental education is offered in a flexibly paced environment, which allows for remediation and acceleration at the same time. And the one thing they did do, a definite policy change for them, was made their ACA or Student Success course mandatory during the first semester, and for this they have hired additional adjuncts. Our second college, again, highly engaged, but a moderate amount of change. They did a lot, but without a lot of money. They've had a very high level of participation from their president. She actually goes to as many of the committee meetings as they can. One of the first things this college did was to consolidate all of their student success initiatives under one name. North Carolina colleges in particular, I think, were really suffering from initiative overload. We heard Flavor of the Month initiative, and they were afraid to start something else called Completion by Design or Guided Pathways, so they put all their student success initiatives under one name. They assigned their math department chair as the lead for the school, and they formed subcommittees for each of the major initiatives, trying to include as broad-based across the college as they could, but at the same time, not requiring everyone to be at every meeting. They have also implemented multiple measures in terms of placement. They have mandatory orientation, and they hired a new student services personnel to run the orientation. So this as well is not run by faculty, it's run by student services. They do not allow late registration, and a student can retest if they want to, but any type of review is not mandatory, and you'll see in the last college that that's not the case. So they do allow students to retest, but they don't require any sort of mandatory review. This college went to a mandatory advising model for the first 30 hours of a student's program, and this is faculty advising. Their faculty always advised, but it wasn't mandatory for the first 30 hours for every student. To sort of offset the additional load for faculty, they allow their faculty to trade committee commitments for advising load. So the more students you agree to advise, the less college-wide committees you're required to serve on. They hired one student services personnel part-time for the summer, given that most of their faculty are 9 months. And they do use advising software. They've purchased some advising software. They use it for journaling, early alerts generated by faculty. They create action plans for students. And most importantly, I think, they map out academic plans for students for the entire 2 years. Now, their building stakeholder engagement started off with something they called Alphabet Soup. You'll see in a few minutes the school is pretty creative in some of the how they handle some of the initiatives. But there's so many acronyms flying around out there. We could probably have a conversation for 3 minutes and never really say a real word, just all acronyms. And the scary part in North Carolina is that everyone would know what you're talking about. So to really engage their faculty, they created a crossword puzzle that had all the acronyms and what they meant with regards to the initiatives, and they sent that out to everybody. They wanted to have an external partner come in and really explain the national research, show them what their completion and success rates were, excess credit accumulation. They felt that it would be more impactful hearing it from someone outside the college, so they've approached their stakeholder engagement slightly differently than the first college that we mentioned. And they revisited, for structures, programs, and study, they revisited every single one of their programs of study and reduced the number of credits and the number of prerequisites for most of their programs. This college implemented multiple measures to help accelerate students into their program of study, but they have very intentional academic supports in place that they are requiring for students whose high school GPA is 2.6 to 3.0. This college's participation in the Guided Pathways Project and the Student Success Learning Institute has provided them the opportunity to leverage a lot of their work to receive small grants from their community that have allowed them to implement some of their initiatives more effectively. Their development has also become modularized and is offered in a flexibly paced environment, and they're seeing phenomenal success rates in their developmental math, but even more importantly, I think, is the fact that they're seeing 75% success rates in subsequent math courses. So they've done a great job with that. Two local policy changes that this college made, similarly to the first college that we talked about, they are requiring students to take this ACA or Study Skills Freshman Seminar course during their first semester, and they are requiring students to take their Gateway Math and or Gateway English during their first year, and they're actually putting hold on students' accounts until they do that. This college does not offer any type of bridge program. Now, I mentioned that this college is really creative in how they communicate. We all think we communicate quite well. We send emails, we have newsletters, we have dashboards, we go to conferences, and then we go around on campus and we ask people to tell us about some of the initiatives. We ask students, and sadly, it's not exactly as we'd hoped it would be. So I want to show you two things that this college has done. They felt they had a real problem with data. No one on their campus really knew much about the data except the folks intimately involved with each initiative. So very similar to speed dating, they created this program called Data Sharing and Communication. They also call it Data Dating. And this next slide shows what they did. They sent out this invitation to everyone, inviting them to come to their student center and learn about data. They had each of their major initiatives and each of their departments set up a table. They had refreshments at each of the table. Each participant had a punch card. They'd go to the table. They'd hear a 3 to 5 minute presentation about the data. They'd walk away with a handout from that table. They'd get their card punched, and they'd go to the next table. At the end of the day, I think it lasted a couple of hours, and at the end of that, they drew names. If your card was completely punched, they drew names, and their foundation provided $25 gift cards to Amazon and Target, so nothing horribly expensive. But they said it was really effective. Their surveys showed some great results. They tweaked it a little, and now they do it every year. Now, that addressed the faculty and the staff, but they still had a little bit of an issue with students, and so they did this. On the back door of every stall, they posted a newsletter on a monthly basis that just really highlighted some of the changes going on at their college. Okay, the last college that I'll speak about is GTCC, and this was one of the original completion by design colleges, and they've really had some monumental change. Just to give you a little insight into this college, we're 5 campuses and a tech center. You can see that we have a high level of Pell Grant recipients, and historically, more than half of our students placed into developmental education. Our systemic changes revolve around our new student orientation, our developmental education curriculum. We've restructured our programs of study and completely overhauled the academic advising. Our advising models changed from one of reactive problem solver to more of a proactive facilitator for our students. That did require some new or expanded responsibilities, having to explain why we were doing that, and we do have to put holds on students' accounts. So our new student orientation now is year-round. A student has the ability to monitor their application status. We found that students would apply, send it in, and that was it. They thought they had been accepted. They never had an opportunity to check financial aid. They never did anything with their email account or any of the learning management accounts at the college. So we did not help them do that at all, as now we do. They were large orientations that happen a few times a year, mostly centered around registration, and they were not organized really in any fashion. It was just any 300 students could attend each orientation. We didn't have any kind of pre-orientation or any modules for a student to complete prior to coming to the orientation. I know this is a little blurry, but I just wanted to show you this. It's on our home page. This is what a student sees when they click the button that said, I want to apply to GTCC, or I'm a prospective student. Okay, we refer to it as our subway map, which we actually took the idea from a college in Texas. But you can see the different paths that a student would click based on whether they're a new student, a former student, or visiting students. Sometimes at universities, we have visiting students, especially during the summer. Each of these circles that you see on this are hot links that take a student somewhere else. We tell a student what you're going to learn about, how to successfully complete your application, choose a program of study. So you can see here that we really outline for a student what they're going to learn about, and that they'll be completing pre-orientation and an orientation, and how they have to go about paying for classes. And again, each of these circles is a hot link on the website. We are strongly suggesting that our students do career assessment. This is a page that they can get to from one of the subway map circles that you just saw. Right now, our state is using CFNC, and in there's a link for a pretty basic career exploration tool. The student is required to click on this link in order to proceed forward in that subway map. But the reality is they can click in, click out, and not really do anything. But the hope is that if they get here, they'll at least know that there are career exploration tools available to them. Later on during orientation in our freshman seminar, we stress career assessment again, and it's a little more of a mandatory than it is here. Now, pre-orientation, we realized that in the past, our orientation was lasting 3 or 4 hours, and students were definitely zoning out through it, and we felt we had so much to tell them that was important, but it was just too long. And we realized there's a lot we can tell, that information we can pass on to them, but it doesn't necessarily be face-to-face. So you can see the topics here that are included in our pre-orientation. These are modules that a student completes before they are actually allowed to register for orientation. And this is linked through our college software so that they cannot register for an orientation until they have successfully completed pre-orientation. And for those students that do not have computers at home with internet access, we have many labs on campus. Okay? And just a little bit more about what they're going to learn about during the pre-orientation and orientation. So we tried to be as explicit as we could. Previously, I really mostly covered most of this before. Our orientation and advising really wasn't advising at all. It was just registration. They sat down with someone we called an advisor, but it was just, what classes do you want this semester? Let me help you. We had no structure for advising outside of orientation. We did have an advising center, but a student could choose to stop by there or not stop by, and typically when they did stop by, it was because they were experiencing some sort of difficulty, and it was often too late to help them. Okay. We also ran into, without any kind of journaling, we ran into the he said, she said, that teacher told me to take something and I don't need it, or really just a lack of understanding on a student's part. So now we journal what we tell our students, and it's been much more effective. Our new student orientation is year-round. It's mandatory. As I said, the pre-orientation must be completed first. It's really nice. A student can click on any link and monitor their application status. They have an opportunity to monitor the financial aid status. Often our students would apply for a financial aid, just assume they got it. They'd never read their email. There might be an email saying, we need document X, Y, and Z, and they never knew about it, so they never got their financial aid. Now they can monitor all that. In our orientation, our students are also required to activate their account, their email, Moodle, and SSP stands for the advising software that we use. There's a student portal into that. Our orientations are small. They're on every campus, and we have a faculty advise on a specific program of study. So I mentioned that we've completely overhauled the academic advising. Once a student takes a placement test, they're required to meet with an advisor. It is a faculty advising model, but the first meeting is with someone in our advising center. Those advisors will look at a student's placement test score. If they're close to the cutoff, the advisor will suggest that they do a review and then retest. We do require students, there's a mandatory review students must complete in order to retest. And again, that's the review is linked directly with our testing center so that they can't go in there and say we did it if potentially they haven't. We found, we've been doing this for a number of years, and we found that 50% of the time when a student retests after completing a review, they'll move up in reading and English, and 33% of the time they'll move up at least one level in math. We follow those students to see how they've done in their curriculum level courses, and they've done just as well, and in some cases better than the others. And then we create a 2-year math or academic plan for a student based on what they think they want to do. It's proactive. It's I don't really like the word intrusive, but I guess that's a buzzword these days. But it's definitely proactive. A student is required to meet with their advisor at least every other semester. We guide them through their program of study, tell them what they need to take, when they need to take it, and there's this electronic record of advising, so a student can see any of their instructors or any advisor. If their assigned advisor is not available, that person can pull up a journal and learn exactly what was said for them. So we advise, but the student actually registers themselves. Just a graphic of how our advising works, and I need to speed up here a little bit. You can see it's in every other semester. These special groups of students always meet with an advisor in our advising center. They do not have a faculty advisor. Of course, not to say that faculty doesn't help guide them, but they do meet. There are special populations, and they meet always with folks in the advising center. The key features that we looked for and use in our advising software, you can see here, are some of our intake, although we're hoping to improve upon that a little bit. But the journaling, the tracking the conversations, creating the academic plan for a student. Unfortunately, we have no way of keeping a student on that academic plan. Sometimes you'll advise them, they'll register for a course, you'll look at their records a month or so later, and you'll see they've changed something that's put them off plan. So we don't have a way currently of keeping them on academic plans, or at least warning them that they're going off their plan. And then we have these early alerts issued by faculty. A big change for faculty, so we had quite a bit of change. The training was mandatory, part of our professional development for the year. It consisted of mostly online training. Some people preferred to do face-to-face. And we required a rotation in our Student Success Center, our advising center. Some of our faculty expressed concerns that they've really never advised before, they've only registered, so that was the reason for that. We have multiple measure placement criteria as well. We have very specific academic interventions in place for students that fall with high school GPA 2.6 to 3.0. We have these stackable credentials that we review with students prior to them choosing their program of study, showing them, if you're this program of study, here's the certificate you can earn, here's the type of job you can get, here's approximately how much it pays. We have credit for prior learning, and we do offer summer bridge camps for both high school graduates and GED students and boot camps. We changed our reading and English prerequisites to co-requisites for all the sections that you see there. So our highest level of developmental was a co-req for these courses rather than a prereq, more aligned with getting them into their program of study as quickly as possible. These are some of the topics that we covered during our bridge program. We actually sat down. It was a week-long session. It was a sort of a 9 to 1 or 9 to 2 every day, well, Monday through Thursday. We had them complete their FAFSA right then and there. Someone from financial aid came in and helped explain it to them. We used Moodle at our college, so we actually had these students log on to their Moodle account, learn how to check their email, complete their application. There were presentations on how to take a test in general, how to take a placement test, which is slightly different. There were optional campus tours, and we tried to encourage these students to actually go ahead and register. This was funded by our internal foundation. It wasn't really very expensive. We included lunch for each of the students. And one of the really nice carrots here, and they got bus passes. Each day they got a bus pass for the next day. But if they actually went ahead and registered for their classes, at the 10% point, if they were still enrolled in those classes, they got one of their classes for free, and our foundation paid for that. You saw that we have career assessment as part of our pre-orientation, but we also emphasize it during that face-to-face orientation. We use Focus Tube software, and that's used in our college transfer or ACA classes. And then again, help plan these at least 2 semesters of class schedules, hopefully 2 years for our students. Okay. We reduced the number of electives for our students, so hopefully we won't have that student that accrues 180 credits but no certificate or associate's degree. We tried to be more intentional about sequencing our courses so that if a student stopped out for a semester, there were still options for them. And I will turn it over to Margaret now from Davidson, and she can tell you about their college.
So I'll share with you a little bit about the college in general. We're a smaller college than Guilford Technical Community College, although we're just down the highway, so we're not far apart at all. And we've implemented many of the same approaches, or at least in terms of the big picture, talking about these approaches, much the same as GTCC has that Susan just shared. However, what I want to share with you is that we've approached it a little differently. Our college culture and the engagement of leadership has been a little different at our college. So I really want to spend some time sharing that and how that has led to the changes that we've experienced on our campus at DCCC. So here you can see a number of different things that were transpiring kind of back to back to back. We also talk a lot about the alphabet soup that existed in our world between 2009 and 2012 especially, because just about every semester we were dealing with something new, some new initiative, some new focus. And so that was really kind of keeping us all popping around campus and engaged in lots of different things. And the reason that that's so important is to understand that our president is laser focused on student success. And she ensures every time we meet, and we have all campus meetings at the beginning of each semester, so at the beginning of fall semester, every single person who works on our campus, from the senior leadership all the way down to frontline, faculty and staff, but also custodial staff, maintenance, every person on our campus comes to these opening sessions, and she ensures that we're all in it for the students. That is our mantra. We are here for the students, and that is why we make the decisions we make. So all of this was going on really simultaneously because we are all in at Davidson. And so this kind of set the stage for the changes that came about and our engagement as we came aboard as a year one completion by design college, or on that within the first colleges in the state to participate. So a primary focus, obviously, through all of the work that came out of the cross-campus conversations, the engagement with external stakeholders, and the work that was being done through each of the initiatives that I just shared, was reorganizing or realigning the services that were going on in our student affairs area. So really focusing on that front door experience for students and aware of what they were experiencing and how it was working for them. So we redesigned our services into a student success center. We put career exploration with career counselors at the front door so that that is a part of our enrollment process now. And students, if they are undecided about their program of study, they are required to meet with an enrollment or a career counselor as a part of the enrollment process. And that conversation starts early. If, as Susan mentioned earlier, regarding perhaps programs of study that they may not be accepted into, like selective admissions programs, then career counselors meet with those students to talk about alternatives and planning appropriately so that they're not left without a particular path if they don't get into the program that they're initially seeking. So many of these things were taking place. Centralized advising, we moved from a faculty model to a mandatory professional advisor model that requires every single curriculum student to meet with an advisor every semester. And that was quite a switch from the prior model where students were kind of spread across campus, across faculty, and brought them together so that really that allowed us to focus on what the needs were of each student at the time that the student needed intervention. Similar to what you heard from Susan at GTCC, it really is more about supporting the student success, and advising is truly that now on our campus, as opposed to having a conversation about what your course schedule looks like for this semester. So we've moved away from that focus on registration. All of that came about, again, through leadership and the conversations that were had across campus and that were really encouraged by our campus leadership. And so while the vision for student success was set by our president and shared widely by our president at every opportunity, how we made that happen really occurred at the ground level. So at our campus, with our faculty and staff, top-down decisions just don't go very well. There's a lot of pushback when there is a feeling that things are being pushed down from above. And so our president was very in tune with that and encouraged faculty and staff to take ownership of the changes that needed to be made and to make those changes happen. However, she set the stage for that. So here you'll see, kind of the student at the center of what's happening on our campus. And in addition to the traditional student services and student affairs and academic affairs areas, our president set the tone for our focus on student success by actually creating a senior level administrator position with the approval and support of the Board of Trustees, and identified a vice president for student success and communications, creating an entirely new position and redesigning the way that our college really approached business as usual with a focus on student success. That was critical because in addition to student success initiatives falling under that vice president's purview, that vice president also is responsible for institutional effectiveness and institutional research. So instead of that living separately as part of a compliance piece that was the case prior to this change, our focus now related to what we do on campus and how we meet the expectations both internally and externally are driven by and organized around our focus on students. So that was a significant alteration, really, for us and redesign of our culture, building commitment from across campus and getting faculty and staff on board. Specifically related to what took place with program redesign, which was a somewhat painful part of the work that was done. That went over and we redesigned every single program of study, eliminating electives, narrowing course selections, in some cases, eliminating courses themselves that faculty were really strongly in support of and enjoyed teaching and did not want to see go. But that worked well on our campus because faculty led the effort, and our president allowed for the time and the space to have the conversations needed to mobilize everyone on campus around the changes that needed to be made. And at the end of the day, the conversation always came back to what is in the best interest of students and what will best support student learning. So that has been our approach and our focus on really creating this culture of advisement that we refer to here at Davidson, where every single person on our campus has a responsibility for and a commitment to helping students find their path to success.
Okay, so just sort of summarize here the tips and lessons that we've learned as we've gone through this process over the last number of years is really to make advising mandatory and to use data to engage the campus. We found that once we really showed the data to a lot of people, we turned some of our folks that maybe were yellow lighters, and maybe sort of on the fence about it, into green lighter, realizing you really needed to do something. We tried to break down the silos as much as possible and have cross-functional teams at the same time being cognizant of everyone's time. And of course, always to, as much as possible, try to stay focused on the big picture and the big plan. For our final thoughts and sort of the guided pathways essentials, students want that clear roadmap. Just tell me what to do from when I start to when I finish. Simplify their choices. 180 electives to choose from is really more than they need. Students need guidance, choosing a program of study and then entering that program of study. Advising software or some other mechanisms to carefully monitor their progress and give frequent feedback, not just when they're either in financial or academic difficulties. And as you heard Margaret say, really empowering faculty and staff to make the changes and lead the redesign. You don't need to get people to buy in if they've been part of the process from the beginning. People are naturally invested in what they help create. So as much as possible, always have it be an effort that involves faculty and staff. And we thank you for your time. We'll address any questions that you may have. Yesenia, are you still there? Are there any questions?
Hi, everyone. Sorry about that. We had a little technical difficulty on our end over here. At this moment, if anyone has any questions, I ask that you type it in. And I see that we do have some questions. So, Susan, I'll start with the first one. Well, actually, we have more comments than we have questions. One was, what was the timeline start to today? So I'm wondering if that means how long you've been engaged in this process.
In fall 2011, 2012, the 5 completion by design colleges engaged in the planning year, and then from there began to make changes at their colleges. So those changes have been, some were initially kind of piloted and then scaled, and that work has continued so that now all of the initiatives that we've engaged in to date are fully implemented.
So it's been about 4 years from when we first started, and we have 1 more year to fully implement and continue scaling. Are there any other additional questions?
Hi, Susan, can you hear me?
We can now.
Okay, sorry, we were having some technical difficulties on our end. I was sharing that in your last response, it appears that you may have been muted in the beginning, but I'm hopeful that they received the information they needed. If not, they're welcome to ask questions again. You have another comment. Someone said, great presentation. Thanks for sharing. To the second speaker, so that would be Margaret. How long did it take your institution to implement the changes that you made? I think I heard 4 years. Is that correct?
Yes, from start to where we are now. And I can tell you that our approach is that we're never fully there, so that we are constantly evaluating and tweaking and based on the data that we're getting, trying to make changes as we go. But we've been at this for about 4 years, and I think that the ball is rolling in the right direction. We're seeing great outcomes, and we will continue moving in this direction.
Thank you. The next question is, how is advising handled given the large number of students on each campus, regardless of the model being used?
At Guilford Tech, a student is assigned a faculty advisor that aligns with their program of study. I do have to tell you it is a little bit challenging sometimes since we're multi-campus, because a student may be taking, for any one semester, they may be taking several of their courses on one campus, yet their advisor is on another. And that's really handled differently depending on each student and each advisor. Sometimes the advisor will drive to the other campus. Sometimes they'll advise via phone or FaceTime, and in the worst scenario, I think, via email. So that can be challenging at times. Also, faculty caseloads really vary depending on the program of study, and we haven't quite figured out how to really deal with those inequities yet. But it can range, anywhere from our very small programs can have 20 or 25 advisees, up until 100. Now, again, we don't see every advisee every semester, so it's not quite as bad as it sounds, but that is still a challenge we're trying to work through.
Thank you.
And on our campus, okay, I was going to say, with centralized advising, our approach, we initially designed it so that each of our professional advisors are connected to what we've organized as programs of study into what we call schools of learning. So they become program specialists for students and programs within each particular school. But we have differing needs, obviously, as everyone on the call does, for differing students. So students who need more intensive time are provided the opportunity to engage with the advisor face-to-face and through more, more intensive advisement appointments, whereas students who just need to touch base because they've got their plan in place and they're staying where they need to and they're being successful may be able to just connect via email or via a Google Hangout conversation or a phone call, or even just the advisor goes and meets with a class of students, and for the students who are being successful, that's enough to say, yes, you're still on track, I've checked it out, everything's going well, keep up the good work. For those students needing more support, then advisement appointments are utilized.
Thank you. The next question is, you mentioned reducing credits in programs. Do you have a state mandate for general education or the like that needs to be met?
We do. There's a minimum number of credits and specific courses for each of our programs of study. But what we found when we looked at a lot of these programs is that over the years, the credit accumulation has just slowly crept up. And some of our programs that only maybe had a 64 credit requirement for graduation were up in the low 70s. We also had each department review their courses and their student learning outcomes to determine if there were potential duplication of some of these learning outcomes. And then with just modifying one of the courses slightly, that was sufficient to include all of those student learning outcomes. And that was one method of reducing the number of courses. So that was how we do have the mandate, but that's how we were able to do that. And then the removing prereqs, in some cases, no one really knew how specific courses got to be a prereq. Everyone just, you hear people say, well, the state requires us to do that. When in fact we looked into it, that really wasn't the case at all. But so it had been put in place 10, 15 years ago, and those folks were long since gone. So some of the prerequisites we were able to remove for that reason. And then several of the prerequisites were changed to co-requisites. As you saw us mention, our highest level of DevEd co-reqing with the first level of curriculum courses.
Thank you. The next question is, what can you share with us about the effects of these initiatives on retention?
You know, we've just in the last week, we've gotten some of our data and some of our numbers and our key performance indicators. That's always been a bit of a sticking point, I guess. And until now, we were saying all these things are great. The national research shows they work, but because we're a community college, we have so many part-time students, it's been difficult. But we are very happily, I don't want to say surprised, that doesn't sound very good, does it? But pleased to see that for most of these initiatives, our graduation rate's gone up, the number of excess credit accumulation has gone down, students accumulating 9 credits towards their program of study in the first year has gone up. So really the data is looking quite good. I'll say the only one that's probably not really looking very good for us right now is students coming out of developmental education are really not being too successful at their first attempt of a curriculum level math or English course. And we have some work to do on that. We need to figure out how to make the multiple measures policy work, et cetera. But it is having a positive impact, and we just saw that data this past week.
I can tell you I've been working on some of this for our Achieving the Dream conference, or annual Dream that's coming up at the end of February. I know several of you probably are thinking about attending as well. But I was looking at some data, and one of the KPIs, the success in the Gateway Math or English within the first year, on first attempt. Our rates have absolutely been so encouraging. Now, it's encouraging because our rates were so poor before, so it's important to note that we're not where we need to be yet. But we have seen a 128% increase in students, first time ever in college students, who are successfully completing their Gateway Math on the first attempt within that first year of enrollment. And 128% increase, I mean, that was just far beyond what we had hoped. Do we need to increase that several more 100%? Yes, but that's certainly demonstrating that we're moving in the right direction. And so especially with students who don't want to take math, the ones who come in and fear it, or who have had experiences where they aren't expecting to be successful, we are making progress, and that was really encouraging. So we'll keep hammering away at that as well.
Thank you, Susan and Margaret. I just want to be mindful of your time and ask if you still have time for more questions.
Sure.
Okay. One comment is inspirational, just what we needed to hear. The next question that came in, I think you may have answered, which was, what are some of the outcomes you've experienced? Have your retention and graduation rates improved? If so, by how much? And has your student satisfaction improved? I do believe you answered most of that. The next question is, have any of your colleges implemented a block scheduling model? If not, any discussion of that?
I am not aware of any of our colleges in the state that have implemented block scheduling. I know some of the community colleges in New York, part of the CUNY system, do that, but we have not done that in North Carolina.
Thank you. In reviewing and streamlining your programs, you mentioned eliminating courses. Were programs or certificates also eliminated? And then second part, you said that faculty led this process. How was the process initially started?
The initial process really was begun, and first of all, in answer to the first question, certificates or programs weren't eliminated. As long as there was demand for those programs, that didn't change. But what changed was focusing on what specifically students needed within the program, what courses they needed to achieve those student learning outcomes that had been identified. And so the process was initiated with the data, and for the career and technical programs, or in North Carolina, our associate and applied science programs, those were pretty structured already, but there was still room to eliminate some of those additional courses that had been added over the years that weren't required, and that in many cases duplicated student learning outcomes that were addressed in another course. For the general education courses and our associate in arts or associate in science courses, primarily associate in arts, that had more flexibility, more electives, that process was begun by looking at what students were able to transfer to a senior institution and what counted toward their degree when they moved on and transferred to work toward their bachelor's degree. And once that data was presented, faculty were really kind of in awe that what they thought was such a great experience and so beneficial for the student really was costing them time and money toward their end goal. And so that allowed faculty to have a very different conversation and to recognize the need to, again, make the decision from the standpoint of the student, or in some cases, and one of the faculty members said, you know, if this were my child as a parent, I would be really concerned about the amount of time and money that's being spent when they're not going to be able to get any credit for it when they transfer. So that really was instrumental in moving our process forward.
And also when we started, we did not have strong enforceable articulation agreements with our senior institutions. We had agreements, but they really weren't being adhered to at all. So part of this process also led us to form very strong articulation agreements with the 16 public universities in the state. And so that was sort of a collaborative effort between the universities and the community colleges as to which courses they would take and accept as is, not just for elective credit. And then I think that in turn helped at the community colleges because, you know, as Margaret said, we would say to the faculty, look, they're not going to take this at the universities. They're not going to accept it. There was definitely fear from faculty that they would lose jobs because their course that they, you know, loved teaching, their favorite course, was no longer going to be offered, or it was going to be offered, but maybe just as one of 3 or 4 electives that a student now has. But faculty were reassigned to other classes still within their discipline, and full-time faculty did not lose jobs because of the streamlining that the adjuncts part-time did. But full-time faculty did not lose jobs because of the realignment of the structured program.
Thank you. Regarding your student success course, the question about whether it is credit bearing or not, and if so, how many credits do students receive?
We have several different student success courses, but the one that we mandate, GTCC doesn't mandate it for the first semester, but they do mandate you take the course. But the one course that is mandated is for our college transfer students. It's 1 credit, and the universities will accept it. And then some of our technical programs have their own version of a student success course that's more aligned to their program of study, and those are typically not transferable. Those credits are not transferable, but they're we have one student success course that's 2 credits that's aimed primarily at our developmental education students, and those credits are not transferable.
Thank you. Our last question is, what do you attribute to the increase of student success in developmental math classes?
Well, we've really made a conscious effort, I think, through all of these initiatives to look at what students need as momentum points and looking at the barriers. So we've removed some of the barriers. We've adopted the modularized approach to developmental education, and that was a redesign of developmental education in North Carolina, where we eliminated the, perhaps some colleges had as many as 4 or 4.5 years of developmental education if you took 1 course each semester, and now they're modularized down to 4-week modules, and there are 8 4-week modules. So in a 2-semester period, if you were required to take every single one, which is not the case for most of our college-level math, you could still complete it in less than half the time from before, so that helped. Another real support for that was through our focus in mandatory advising. We had conversations with students about the expectation, really. We kind of put it out there as you need to go ahead and enroll in your math. So the conversations advisors were having with students emphasized the importance of getting started. And then we have built within our academic support the opportunity for students to get assistance in their classes. Faculty have held office hours in our Learning Commons, which is our really our tutoring lab. So we've done lots of different things. I expect that we'll see even greater success as we go forward, because another change that we've made on our campus as a result of recognizing that some students are still really struggling is to take our lowest level of 2 levels of developmental math and our lowest level of developmental English and reading, and we've removed them from the DevEd curriculum itself and approach that as a basic skills model, or a model where students are not charged tuition, but they have more time, more than just the 4-week time frame to address the content of the course. And we've seen tremendous success, but that's just in fall 2015 we implemented that. So I hope to see that we're continuing to increase those numbers as we go forward.
And one other point I'll just add is that when a student works through a module at most of our colleges, but not all, they're giving credit for topics that they've already demonstrated mastery in. So if there's, let's say there were 30 assignments in any one particular module, if a student can demonstrate mastery on day 1 via a diagnostic test that they know 18 of, or what I said 15, if they know 10 of those 15 assignments, whatever, then they have the ability to skip that and it just accelerate to what they don't know. So they're no longer spending time working on material that they already know. They're just concentrating on what they don't know. So they have the ability to accelerate even within a module. And I think that's really helped. And we've gotten rid of this whole 16-week long semester of, you get it or you don't. And if you don't, you start over, with the entire 16 weeks, where maybe the only thing you didn't really master was, the last 2 weeks of the semester. And so now our students are not needing to repeat an entire 16-week semester. They potentially might just need to repeat 1 or 2 of the 4-week modules. So there's this, sort of interim credit given for the modules along the way, and I think that's really helped.
Many thanks and sincere appreciation to you, Susan and Margaret, for this great webinar today, and thanks to our colleagues across the state of New Jersey for joining us. This now concludes our webinar.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.